Welcome to the recording of session 3 of the Tanzu Office Lounge series, focusing on VMware Pivotal Labs' unique point of view and pre-built processes around user-centric design. So it's about enabling our customers to become relentlessly end-user focused, not only from the early outset of product or service design, but also by continually gathering feedback from end users to enable your team to deliver a service experience that is continually relevant and even proactive over the course of the entire product lifecycle. I'm Lindsay Osaka, and I'm joined by Danny Sandoval, product designer with VMware Pivotal Labs. We appreciate your interest, and we hope you enjoy.
Thanks, Lindsay. Hi, all. Thanks for joining us today. I'm really excited to talk to you about how user-centered design, the practices, drive impactful products and services within our clients' organizations. So just to introduce you a little bit to VMware Pivotal Labs, we are a consulting group within VMware that enables our clients essentially to take the broad scope of business problems and figure out how to solve it in a way that really focuses on the users of their software. And we do so through a number of different types of engagements. One of them is called the Navigator, and often these Navigators lead into an app modernization project. Other times it can lead into a replatforming or other more technical engagements. But the case study that I'll be showing today really goes through to show how one type of Navigator leads to a really strong backlog for product teams to create a set of impactful products and services that deliver the most valuable thing first. And so at VMware Pivotal Labs, we do have a few principles, and one of them is to start simple. And so our goal going into an engagement, especially a Navigator, where we have a lot of different priorities and a lot of different goals, is to learn just enough to begin and let the work inform the direction. And the reason we do that is we're going to learn a lot more along the way, shipping working software and getting user feedback, then planning a lot up front and building up that risk before really testing to see if it works in the real world. And so, for the majority of this webinar, I'll be going through a case study at a Fortune 100 insurance company in the United States. And they came to us with a few goals that we were able to identify in what's called the Discovery Workshop. It's basically a short session where we get together with the stakeholders who are interested in working with VMware Pivotal Labs, and we identify the problems that they're trying to solve, and we try to figure out what the best team to throw at that problem would be. And so in that workshop, we were able to come up with a few goals, kind of split between product goals and team goals as well. And so at this company, they had a pretty gnarly problem built on a really old mainframe, and they wanted to automate a lot of the manual processes that have kind of sprung up to duct tape the gaps in their existing software solutions. And by automating those processes, they wanted to have a more efficient system, not only for their internal team, which this product would be built for, but also for the end customer who basically has this long turnaround time from the bills that this software was creating. Now, this was, as I mentioned, a large insurance company, so regulatory compliance was a big deal for them. There's a lot of eyes looking at these numbers, and so it was really important to them that going into this engagement, we identified places where we could audit and have a record of each individual calculation, as well as who was touching and changing pieces along the way. And that kind of encapsulated the product goals and really what we identified early on before we even started the Navigator to ensure that our team could get off to a good start and build the right thing. But on the other side here, you can see how Pivotal Labs really leaned into the expertise that we have building modern software, for the past 20 years, and that was to come up with a strategy for delivering value incrementally and use this Navigator as well as the app modernization project itself to establish a longer-term roadmap that this team could continue to iterate on even after VMware Pivotal Labs rolled off. This was super important for this last goal, which was teaching this company's teams how to engineer, build, and deliver software in a world-class way. What people find is if they think about software in terms of projects, those things tend to peter out, and the software becomes unmaintainable, and it's very difficult to return to it and build new features. But if you think of teams as delivering products in a user-centered way, we can actually, those products will have a lot longer life, they'll be more maintainable, and that's something that our engineers, our product managers, and our designers really excel at. So this company really wanted to make sure that was part of our engagement goals, and it helped us as we were focusing on the tools we were bringing out of our toolkit to really explain how we got there along the way to our clients that we were working with. And so, as I mentioned, this is an example of one form of Navigator, and the biggest part of a Navigator for us, you kind of saw the compass there at the beginning of this presentation, is to really find the right place to start. Figure out what's the most valuable thing, what are the biggest pain points, and what's the biggest risk that we can target first. And a good way to identify what to do first is to actually gather context. And so for many of the product team that rolled on during this engagement, this was their first time seeing a lot of the problems. The discovery workshop tends to be a smaller core group where these goals are created. But when the Navigator starts, that's the situation where we bring in all the forces. We bring in usually a balanced team of a designer, a product manager, and quite a few engineers. And we also bring in those key stakeholders for this situation. It was a lot of line of business heads. There were some more strategic stakeholders who maybe were cross-functional that depended on this team. But basically, by getting all the people who knew this business process into the room and doing what's called an event storming, we were able to create a shared understanding of the business events and pain points that made up the problem domain. And you can see here, really zoomed out at a high level, what the output of an event storm kind of looks like. It's a lot of stickies. And the way that we facilitate this in a remote world is actually pretty interesting. So this was created in an environment where we were pretty used to being next to one another, pre-COVID. And because of that, we used to have all these stickies along the wall. And the exercise was great. It was an awesome way to get everyone involved, excited, and collaborating on this business process. But the way we facilitated it there was pretty much everyone got to write down, basically from end to end, what the business flow of this particular process was, and they were putting it dynamically on the board, all at the same time. Now, with the physical constraints of the world, people were kind of bumping shoulder to shoulder, trying to, put their sticky on the board. And one of the nice things about being remote is we no longer have that constraint. We have infinite whiteboard space. We have, infinite number of stickies we can put on the board, lots less trash. And we actually ended up creating a environment where, every stakeholder, from those who maybe have an ancillary understanding of the business process to those who are embedded in it in a day-to-day, perspective, all of them were contributing, asking questions. And by the end of it, not only was our team up to speed on, the problem we were trying to solve and kind of the domain that we were trying to work within, but also those who maybe were less involved in the day-to-day business had a good idea of why this project even existed in the first place, which created a lot more buy-in for the engagement and allowed for stakeholders to have more cross-functional conversations, even when VMware Pivotal Labs went off and started to build our first prototypes. And now, alongside this, what we tend to do during a Navigator is pretty much what you'd see in a standard user-centered design process. We'll review existing research, do competitive analysis, do some subject matter expert or stakeholder interviews, as well as get involved with our end users and discuss various approaches on how we could actually identify the biggest pain points. And that's really what we're doing here. When we're gathering contexts, we're not only onboarding the entire team, but we're also creating an environment of learning where we document those learnings and then use it to convey what we believe is going to be the highest, I would say, bang for our buck when we're looking at the problems that we could solve. And that's really the next step of the Navigator. This is something that, depending on the engagement, a Navigator could take a week, it could take a month. It really depends on how invested we want to get early on in some of this domain context. But really the goal of this documentation and prioritization is to figure out what the most important problem to solve is first. And the reason why is because we want to be able to ensure that the thing that we're working on as a balanced team is the right thing to invest in right now. And so to document that and to explore those different ways of say, approaching the problem, we use a number of artifacts that can help us have these conversations around who are the people that we are solving this problem for, what are their biggest pain points, and what places along the way are they running into issues. And so one of the artifacts that some of you might be familiar with is a persona. Those personas tend to, be a encapsulation of all of the people that we've talked to and the roles that they play in this business process. And so in this particular domain, there were two personas, and we were able to visualize them going through their day-to-day workflow on what's called a service blueprint. And what this did was it reframed the workflows that we identified in that event storm together from the user's perspective. And that helped us identify those key interactions and highlighted where we needed to do additional research, as well as where those bigger pain points were that we could go ahead and start to prioritize. And so we prioritize these in a way that Pivotal Labs loves to do. It's called the 2x2. And this allows for the team to form a strong opinion on what should be worked on first. I don't have a good visual for you here because most of this is kind of domain specific, but essentially on a 2x2 exercise, we draw a big line right in the middle, and that's our vertical axis. And in that vertical axis, we label the top and the bottom as highest business value and lowest business value. And we'll plot those based on the conversations that we've had with our subject matter experts, as well as sometimes even the stakeholder in the room who's able to give us that guidance. And then we take those sticky notes that are now virtual, and we now see that they are ranked from top to bottom, highest business value to lowest business value. With that, we then draw another axis, the horizontal axis, and we tend to use one of two axes depending on the engagement. One would be highest user value to lowest user value, which we can glean from some of our conversations that we've had with these end users. And other times, we'll take those same stickies and we'll plot them from lowest development cost to highest development cost. Now, it's important to know which side of the axes we're plotting these on, because what we're looking for is in that upper right-hand corner, the lowest cost to develop and the highest business or highest user value is going to be the thing that we target first. And so this simple exercise, which usually takes just a number of like half an hour or an hour, we're able to get a sorted ranked list of things we should work on first, second, and third based on the information that we know right now. As I mentioned, this process of gathering all this context and plotting the first thing we should work on first can sometimes take a number of days. And that's one of the things that VMware Pivotal Labs excels at, is getting started quickly and letting the work guide us through the process. And so what this process leads us to is what's called an outcome-oriented roadmap. And this is used as a focal point for our stakeholder conversations. This style of roadmap makes it easy to discuss prioritization, dependency management, and implementation trade-offs. And so despite having a 2x2, it's hard to know what all the implications of doing this thing first is really going to mean when you put it in relationship to the next thing and the thing after that and the thing after that. So what we tend to do is we put it left to right, and I'll have an example of this later in the webinar, that shows for ourselves as a team, as well as the stakeholders that we're having a conversation with, what doing something first means for the rest of the work that this team was probably contracted to work on as well. And this is super helpful for guiding us for our first step into the unknown. But it also helps just kind of have an open conversation about the trade-offs of doing that thing first. And so you may find that like another team depends on this, and that may change something that maybe is the second or third most valuable thing from the user's perspective, but maybe from the business perspective, it's really valuable that we do that first. And the nice things about these artifacts is it lets us have those conversations in a very fast and open way. And by the end of these conversations, we have a clear understanding of what we're working on next. And so what you're seeing here, you might have seen in other webinars, or maybe you've seen it from our website. But this is a number of the services that VMware Pivotal Labs offers across applications and platforms. Kind of these two parallel ways of thinking about our software. And you can see Navigator here, kind of across both sides of the spectrum here. And in this particular engagement, this Navigator led into the modern application development, or one type of thing that we can deliver as a VMware Pivotal Labs team. But you can see here that this same process, talking to users, talking to our subject matter experts, documenting our learnings, and prioritizing our problems can also help with platform deployment, platform management, as well as the program and modern platform governance. And this is something that we've definitely found can be super helpful in both the short-term planning of current products that we need to release in the next quarter, all the way to long-term planning. For many years, this process of really identifying what's the most important thing and using the research and the work to guide us is definitely something that we excel at VMware Pivotal Labs, and we're excited to help our clients facilitate as well. And so in the modern app development situation, what basically we come up with after we have our product-oriented roadmap is a backlog that we can go ahead and just start pulling things off the top of. This is where developers really get their hands dirty, lines of code coming out the door, shipping to production as quickly as possible. And when you're shipping working software early and often, you get real user feedback from the context that they're working within, as opposed to just sitting up front, doing prototypes and building up a bunch of risk along the way. And that's something that VMware Pivotal Labs has a strong opinion, but it's also loosely held. We know that there are situations where it does make sense to do more research up front, and that's where those longer navigators tend to come from, in situations where shipping to production might be pretty risky, and so the best way to mitigate those risks is to do a more prototype-focused build, measure, learn loop. And so with that, I wanted to give an example of an outcome-oriented roadmap. This one's pretty silly. It's basically optimizing the laundry workflow. But here you can see that I'd say after our first release, we've successfully reduced the time spent folding and putting away clothes. And we're now bringing the same outcome-oriented roadmap to the team, as well as our stakeholders, to decide on what we should be working on next. Now, naturally, after doing the 2x2, we may find that speeding up the wash cycle, or that other step in the laundry workflow, might be the thing to work on next. It was either the lowest thing to develop in terms of it was the next cheapest thing, or maybe it was identified during our user research that it was the next highest value. We may find through after shipping our working software and getting real feedback is that maybe our third release actually has more business value. This can happen for a number of reasons. The business may have changed, COVID may have hit, and it turns out that with the new context, you now have a new set of problems, or maybe the problems that you had originally deprioritized are now more important. And one of the nice things about VMware Pivotal Labs methodologies and ways of working is this document you can change. We can move it. We can do that thing next instead. And having these fast feedback loops where we're constantly letting the work guide us, we're actually able to stay on course even after the navigator is long gone. And so that's where some of these things, some of these practices maybe can be applied. User-centered design and development practices that you may have seen in your work, but within the context of lean and agile. Context maps is one of them. It's a great working document that we can use to show how data can flow both through the existing system and in our new systems. This is a great way for teams to work together, especially cross-functionally, and when you have to decide on who owns which data and where. In addition, we do a thing called design studios, where we get everybody involved for more complicated interactions or development patterns. We put a statement on the board, the how might we statements, and we have all disciplines on the project team and even stakeholders get involved in this process. We do crazy eights, where we split our our papers into 8 sections, and we time ourselves to see how quickly we can find as many solutions to this problem at once. What we find through still engaging in user-centered design long after the Navigator and into the application development process is we're able to keep our team members engaged in really understanding the implications of each of our design decisions, and through user research, from showing them our working software to showing them our prototypes, we're able to feed that information back into the team, and do yet another design studio, or update our context map, or even ship new software with new hypotheses based on the information that we've learned from our end users. And so these types of artifacts, they're certainly something that are a means to an end. They're just examples of how we at VMware Pivotal Labs use artifacts and conversations to get to production and to get fast feedback from our users. And through our products like the Navigator and the application development work, we're able to deliver software to our users quickly and at a high quality. And it's something that we're really proud of and really excited to hear what types of problems you may have to solve. And with that, I'll just kind of summarize some of the work that we talked about today in this case study, and how a Navigator empowers the team to translate business problems into actionable user stories. And the value of these user stories comes from the information that we've gleaned through this Navigator process. And the more that we ship, the more that we get user feedback along the way, we'll be able to have a better understanding of the value of each of these stories. And through our cross-functional team, our product managers, and our developers, we're able to move forward with the next most valuable thing. And I mentioned a few of those roles off the top of my head, and I'd like to kind of show how those roles interact with one another through this slide. We talked about design quite a bit. Maybe I'm a little biased. I am the designer on most of my teams. But that being said, the reason we're on the team is to answer the question, are we solving a real user need? You also may have heard me mention developers who are trying to answer the question, are we building production-ready, sustainable software? At the end of the day, the software is encoding a business process or a user workflow into lines of code, and that code needs to be maintainable for the long term, and developers are always thinking about that on a day-to-day basis. And at VMware Pivotal Labs, we tend to also pair these two roles with product managers who will answer the question, will this help the business? Now, these roles working together create a product. And we've also seen teams where a QA team comes in and they're able to collaborate with us the same way that the design and developers are overlapping, or the PMs and designers are overlapping. And I think the important part here is not necessarily each of these roles and making sure that they are the exact right person for each one, but rather that the hats that are being worn have a strong opinion, loosely held, so they can have conversations with one another, and there's a natural tension between the answer to the question, are we solving a real user need, and the answer to the question, will this help the business? Because in those conversations where you're trying to answer those questions across disciplines, you're able to have very constructive conversations and lead to a better product. And so all of this is informed by the processes that we discussed earlier in this conversation. And those the information that the team is working on really comes from the stakeholders, product owners, QA testers, the users themselves. We also have ancillary parts of the business that are going to inform our process as well: compliance, legal, marketing. Getting those people involved at the right time and giving us feedback whenever possible is going to make sure that this team is aligned on the business as it continues to grow and evolve into new problem spaces. And then other supporting roles throughout the business, they're part of this product as well. They may not be in every single conversation. They may not be, in the Navigator, every single step along the way of the Navigator. But the nice thing about the types of engagements that VMware Pivotal Labs excels at is it knows when to bring the right people in and how to ask the right questions so we can get the best feedback along the way. And so whether it's a designer, a PM, and a developer all working together, or the QA tester comes in and is working with us as well, we're able to have a balanced conversation through these strong opinions And with that, we're able to move forward together in a way that we're all aligned in. And so that brings us to next steps, which I see Lindsay has popped on to discuss. We would love if you have any ideas based on what we've talked about today for some design or business objectives. Really across a number of opportunities. We'd love to determine where VMware Pivotal Labs can help. You kind of see how a Navigator can be applied to a specific context. Really, those tools are examples of how we bring our best selves to each of these problems and figure out the best way to solve it in the most valuable way. And so with that, I guess I'll hand it back over to Lindsay to see if there are any questions or other parts of our conversation you'd like to discuss. So basically, user-centered design is a set of tools, right? It's a set of practices that we can use to, really break down some of the, bigger scope of ideas, some of the different ways that users may be having problems, and try to identify them and attach language to, the issues that our users are facing on a daily basis. And I think one of the things that designers especially can run into, and I've definitely hit this wall earlier on in my career, is having processes over the people. And focusing more on the artifacts or like the thing that you're producing instead of the information that you've recovered from these conversations. So where I can see UCD falling short and where we usually advise some of our clients to kind of pull back is in like the pixel perfect part of design, where designers will spend a lot of time at making the most beautiful artifact or even making like a prototype that has every single route in it just to make sure that from the design perspective it looks great. But from an implementation perspective, that may take years to get to. So you end up kind of over-promising and under-delivering in those situations. And so I found what tends to work in those situations, and really what kind of gets those UCD processes unstuck, is to start with why, and to ask like, well, why are we creating this prototype, or why are we creating this this slide deck that explains what we learned from our user research. And what tends to be the answer is so we can learn more, or so we can convey our learnings to other people. And if you start with that, if you start with the why and how you might approach that, given, and it tends to help if you have constraints, given we have a week or given we have a day, you tend to prioritize the most important things, and you either create a prototype that actually tests that one thing that you need to test, or even sometimes you can fall back to leveraging other roles to help with the user's design process, which I think actually when you involve more folks with different disciplines, you actually end up having a stronger design overall. And so, yeah, with that, I think the biggest answer to where that question of where does this UCD process tend to get stuck, I think it tends to get stuck when you focus in too much on the tools and don't focus enough on the end product, which is what we're all here for. Getting users involved in the design process and getting a positive business value out of it. I was going to add on to that and say I think it's important that when you have such a big mesh of services, right, opportunities to improve, you're going to hear a lot of pain points, right? We talked about at the beginning of this webinar all these pain points that happened along the way from the user's journey end to end. And it's going to be very easy to just be overwhelmed by that and to say, well, where do we start? From a user-centered design perspective, you tend to have a big list of opportunities and not a good idea as to where to start first. And I think that's really where that balanced team conversation comes in, where that product manager or lead stakeholder opinion tends to really help designers. Is we can come with a laundry list of pain points and a number of issues that we see from end to end, and we can ask the business, which in this case is a large government, and say what's really gonna be the most valuable, or given the priorities of this of our quarter, of our year, out of these pain points, which one is going to help speak to that priority? And you may find, interestingly, a number of answers that help guide you to the right place to start first. And I think with that, along with the understanding that when you're solving an individual problem, you tend to also open up new doors to solve the problems to the left and to the right of it. I think users tend to get drawn to those conversations, and if you're involving them along the way and kind of giving them the updates of, hey, here's the improvements that you're making, we're open to feedback, we're excited to hear from you, you'll find that conversations tend to shift from, here's a list of all my complaints, why haven't you fixed them yet, to instead, I really enjoy seeing the way that you're trying to solve X. And then they start to give you answers. These users start to give you answers of how they'd like to see you solve Y and solve Z. And I think that's something that definitely we're excited about when we get to that point in the project where we've solved enough small problems that users start to see the light, and they're excited to see what the next thing we're going to fix is.
We hope you enjoyed that presentation. For next steps, please feel free to reach out if you'd like to learn more about our UCD processes or other VMware Pivotal Labs services that could enable you to build a culture of innovation that is anchored with a focus on outcomes, delivering an unforgettable UX, as well as quantifiable project success metrics. With that said, we'd love to hear your feedback, and until then, hope you have a great day.